Every day for 30 days, I'm posting tips for those of you who are considering immigrating from America to Norway after the recent presidential election. After the election, my inbox and my social media feed was flooded with people asking how they could move out like I did. And since I moved here 2 years ago, having studied Norwegian language and culture for 25 years, I thought I would give a series of tips that give you a sort of realistic sense of what to expect and if this is right for you, along with how to go about doing it. Day 8, what about the language? Can you get along here without Norwegian, and how hard is Norwegian to learn? These are two of the most common questions I've gotten since I started this series. And I guess since I moved here fluent, I didn't really think about this issue, but let's address it. It seems pretty important, obviously. The easiest thing to say is yes, you can get along here. You can survive with only English. Norwegians have basically the highest level of English competency in Europe. They speak great English. Sometimes I think they speak better than people I know that speak native English, okay? You'll be fine in terms of survival. However, unless you're looking in a job in certain careers like finance or IT, you will really struggle to get a job if you don't know Norwegian. We lived in a bit of denial about this in my family for a while, and my husband took a long time to get a job because we thought he could find something. We thought maybe an English teacher in a high school. As far as we experienced, that was utterly impossible. It was a no-go because it's hard to get your teaching credentials certified over here. For my husband, they straight up don't recognize it as he has 10 years experience. It doesn't matter. Unless you're in IT, maybe oil, finance, you have to have Norwegian to get a job. You can also be a server or a bartender, but you're not going to be able to get over here on a job like that in most cases. So in most industries, you will need Norwegian to get a job. Now, how hard is Norwegian to learn? Linguistic experts say that Norwegian is the easiest language for native English speakers to learn, even when we compare it to something like Swedish, which is mutually intelligible. Norwegian is simply the easiest in terms of grammar and clarity of pronunciation. That being said, most people find that after learning book Norwegian or doing something like Duolingo, they come over to Norway and they find it useless for actually communicating. So when I first moved here, I was so confused because sometimes Norwegians would say, oh gosh, you're so good at Norwegian, it's so hard to learn. And then I see all these linguists saying, no, Norwegian's actually super easy for English speakers to learn. Which is it? Here's the rule of thumb. Norwegian is easy to learn and really difficult to master. Grammatically, it is so similar to English. There are very few major differences in terms of syntax and sentence structure. And there's lots of good resources out there to learn. My favorite is a curriculum called Povei, and I'll put that up on the screen for you. But because Norway is defined geographically by tons of mountains and valleys, there was a lot of linguistic drift over history. Lots of very different sounding dialects developed. And whereas in Denmark, sorry, I was switching between English and Norwegian pronunciation. Whereas in Denmark and Sweden, the governments have worked to kind of neutralize those dialects. Norway has taken pride in them and wanted to preserve them. This means that if you meet somebody that's not from the Oslo area, you will have a very difficult time understanding them. Mind you, I moved here completely fluent and relatively good with the dialects already, and for 6 weeks after moving to Trondheim, I thought I'd been lying to myself my whole life that I couldn't understand Norwegian, but it turns out I had trouble understanding Trøndersk. Now I have a Trøndersk accent. And even to this day, though I speak, according to many people, at the level of somebody who's lived here for 14 or 15 years, many people say I'm the best American they've ever seen speaking Norwegian. I'm not saying this is true that everyone would think it. Many people think this. If I'm tired, sometimes even people in Oslo, I have trouble following if they're talking really fast. It's easy to understand on books and paper. It's going to be harder to actually ever really get along speaking Norwegian in daily life. What does that mean for you who are thinking about immigrating? You have to pass a language test if you ever want permanent residency, and you're qualified for that after 3 years of maintaining skilled labor here. You're probably going to be able to pass that test and get permanent residency rather easily. If you actually need to be fluent in your job, not just to get the job, but to speak it and communicate, like if you want to be a doctor here, and you're going to need to know pretty good Norwegian, it's going to be really hard. Most of your daily life, you're probably going to struggle for most of your life to use Norwegian. You can probably pass the test. And now for my final trick, I'm going to try to demonstrate to you some of the dialect differences. I haven't found a good example online comparing them. I'm going to do it imperfectly, I know, but just to give you as an outsider a sense. So in Norwegian, some of the words are different, but there's also an up and down tonal pattern, and that changes regionally. I probably can't do that perfectly. But if you were to say, hey, what's going on, guys, in Oslo dialect, which is what you're mostly going to be taught in schools and classes, you might say something like, Hva skjer her der? Oh, I almost did dialect. Hva skjer her? I can't do it. Oh my God, I keep doing dialect. Okay. Hva skjer her dere? That's Oslo, and it's very slow because I'm not doing it well. Trøndersk. So you can hear it goes like this. Hva skjer her dere? I'm still doing a bit trøndersk. But in trøndersk, it'd be, hva skjer dere? And then in Bergen, which I'm not going to be able to do perfectly, it's like, hva skjer dere? Hva skjer dere? I can't do it. In my head, I can hear it, but I can't make it come out of my voice. I and me in Oslo is jeg and meg. In trøndersk, it's æ og mæ. And in Bergen, it's æg and meg. So, but that sounds easier than it actually is when you're hearing it. Like, I don't even know why I bothered. Except now it's funny, so I'll leave it in.